The relentless Texas sun hammered Arthur's Uber, turning the dashboard into a griddle that threatened to warp the plastic hips of his gas station hula dancer. Chet Baker's wistful trumpet provided a cool sonic breeze against the scorching air. He'd collected a businessman from the terminal, antsy and phone-fixated. His murmurs a litany of deadlines and KPIs, navigating the Congress and 6th intersection. That swirling vortex of scooters, jaywalkers, and zealous cyclists, chaos erupted at a Tesla. Pearlescent and silent, advancing on autopilot, suffered a sudden, jarring spasm. Its path, previously laser-straight, veered wildly, a drunken stagger across the lanes. Years spent calculating launch vectors at NASA triggered an internal red alert. The Tesla was homing in on him. His passenger, lost in his digital world, droned on, "Look, I appreciate the urgency regarding the Q3." Arthur bypassed politeness. He floored it, the Uber's engine straining with a guttural complaint, and yanked the wheel hard, narrowly dodging a gourmet taco truck. The Tesla, its sensors clearly haywire, careened past, missing his bumper by mere breaths. The businessman emitted a strangled cry, his phone call abruptly terminated. "What in God's name was that?" he gasped, complexion ashen. Arthur, knuckles locked around the steering wheel, drew a steadying breath. "Self-driving glitch," he stated, composure masking the adrenaline surge. Still some bugs in the system. He coaxed the Uber back into its lane, Baker's trumpet resuming its bittersweet melody. Unseen, a black SUV, windows tinted, trailed the wayward Tesla. Inside, Elon Musk, brow deeply etched, observed the near catastrophe on a wall of screens. Each twitch of the wheel, every blip of sensor data, streamed across the displays in live time. "What the hell was that, Sanjay?" Musk's voice, tight with contained rage, ripped through the vehicle. Sanjay, a young engineer with perpetually bloodshot eyes, stammered, "Sir, analyzing telemetry now. Appears to be a temporary GPS dropout coinciding with a LiDAR misinterpretation." The system experienced a brief disorientation. Musk's jaw hardened. Disorientation? This isn't a lost puppy. It's a multi-million-dollar piece of technology. Someone could have been killed. He paused, his focus riveted on the Tesla's camera feed. Rewind. The Uber driver. "I want to see his reaction." Sanjay obeyed swiftly. The monitors replayed the incident, honing in on Arthur's vehicle. Musk scrutinized Arthur's actions. The seamless avoidance, the subtle steering corrections, the almost preternatural anticipation of the Tesla's erratic course. He didn't choke. Musk murmured, a hint of admiration coloring his tone. No panic breaking that he reacted. Decisively, skillfully. He leaned forward, studying Arthur's face. The Uber driver was an older man, a neatly trimmed silver beard framing his face, the glint of wire-rimmed glasses. There was a certain poise about him, an aura of understated capability. "Give me his plate number," Musk ordered. "Complete background check. I want everything on this guy." Sanjay blinked in surprise. "Sir, you want to recruit an Uber driver?" Musk leveled a glacial stare. "I want to understand how someone with zero formal training in autonomous vehicle collision avoidance managed to outmaneuver our AI. There's something there, Sanjay, that a lesson we can extract." Back in the Uber, Arthur's passenger was still rattled. Are you sure you're fit to drive?" he stuttered. Arthur chuckled dryly. "Son, I've faced down worse than that. You still have that meeting to attend, don't you?" He adjusted the rearview mirror. Catching his reflection, he looked older than his years, the lines around his eyes carved deeper by the Texas glare and the burden of past endeavors. NASA, Challenger, the soul-crushing weight of failure. It seemed a lifetime removed that he dropped off the businessman at a towering downtown skyscraper, pocketing a generous tip and a profuse apology for the earlier lack of attention. Watching the man disappear into the revolving doors, Arthur felt a familiar twinge of something, not precisely regret, more a nagging sense of untapped potential. He'd held so much to offer, so many ideas that had never taken flight. He headed back towards the airport, scanning his Uber app for the next ping. The sun began its descent, daubing the sky with fiery hues. Austin was a beautiful city, he conceded, worlds away from the sterile corridors of NASA. His phone chirped. It was Sanjay. Mr. Penhaligon? Sanjay's voice, uncertain, almost pleading. Sanjay here, calling on behalf of Mr. Elon Musk. Arthur frowned. Elon Musk? The rocket guy? Yes, sir. Mr. Musk was impressed with your driving earlier. He'd like to offer you a consulting opportunity. Arthur nearly laughed aloud. Consult? On what? Dodging robot car pileups. Something along those lines. Sir. Mr. Musk believes your expertise and innate grasp of vehicle dynamics could prove invaluable to our autopilot development team. Arthur paused, weighing the absurdity. The offer was outlandish, laughable. Yet something stirred within him, but a flicker of curiosity, perhaps, or the faintest whisper of a chance to prove he was not simply a relic. Tell Mr. Musk, Arthur said slowly, that I'm intrigued, but I have some questions for him too. In the black SUV, Musk paced anxiously. Well, what did he say? Sanjay gulped. He's intrigued, sir, but he has questions. Musk stopped pacing, a laser focus burning in his eyes. Questions? Good. I despise sycophants. I need someone to challenge me, to spot the flaws in my designs. What kind of questions? He didn't specify, sir, just that he has them. Musk grinned, a hint of ruthless anticipation flickering across his features. Excellent. Arrange a meeting tomorrow here in Austin. I want to hear what this old dog has to say. He could be the missing link we've been searching for. He turned, his gaze drawn to the distant silhouette of the SpaceX launch facility. The future of transport isn't just about faster cars or bigger rockets. It's about deciphering the human element. And often, the greatest insights come from the most unexpected sources. The Uber ride interview. The chime from Arthur's phone was a bland intrusion. Another ride request. Another pittance that scarcely compensated for the miles. His gaze flicked to the glowing screen, the route sketched out with familiar ease. Pickup. The bungalow. Santa Monica. Destination. SpaceX. Hawthorne. He exhaled heavily, and Kati leased this one stretched across the city. Maybe the passenger would be feeling generous. Nudging the Tesla around the corner, the electric motor emitted a near inaudible whir, seemingly weary of the constant starts and stops that defined his day. The figure awaiting him was impossible to mistake. The charcoal suit, the kinetic aura that crackled even when still. Elon Musk. That a strange current ran through Arthur, a blend of irritation and something akin to awe. Was this orchestrated? What were the chances? He brought the car to a smooth halt, the door releasing with a soft click. Musk slid in, a wave of sophisticated cologne briefly eclipsing Arthur's ocean breeze air freshener. Arthur, is it good to see you again? Musk's handshake was firm, verging on assertive. Mr. Musk, Arthur responded, keeping his tone even. To SpaceX again? Affirmative. Got a few rockets itching to fly, as you can imagine. A mirthless chuckle followed. Arthur eased into the flow of traffic. The silence grew, heavy with unspoken inquiries, as he concentrated on navigating the afternoon congestion with practiced precision. So, Arthur, Musk began eventually, shattering the quiet. You possess a certain talent behind the wheel. I observed it yesterday. Instinctive, almost prescient. Arthur grunted a neutral acknowledgement. Years on the road. Experience accounts for much, but not everything. There's an inherent understanding there, a feeling for the mechanics, the underlying physics. Musk leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense in the rearview mirror. What occupied your time before this, Arthur, before embracing the joys of ride-sharing? Arthur's muscles tensed. Here it came, the interrogation. He should have anticipated it. This and that. Various jobs, sufficient to cover expenses. Musk appeared unconvinced. You don't strike me as a various jobs kind of individual. Your bearing suggests otherwise. There's a deliberateness to your movements, almost calculated. Arthur's jaw tightened. He detested this. This feeling of being analyzed, his history exposed under a harsh light. Everyone is a construct of their experiences, Mr. Musk, simply byproducts of our past. A valid point, Musk conceded. However, certain experiences leave a more profound mark. Were you involved in technology, software development, perhaps? Autonomous vehicle design? Arthur gave a short, humorless laugh. If I possessed the ability to create self-driving cars, I wouldn't be driving one. A reasonable deduction, Musk replied, though his intonation suggested skepticism that he shifted, producing his phone, holding it almost absently. Look, Arthur, I'm not one for circumlocution that I'm impressed. You averted what could have been a nasty incident yesterday with remarkable composure. Most would have panicked. You didn't. You reacted decisively. You understood the trajectory of events, preemptively almost. Arthur's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The near collision, the adrenaline surge, the instantaneous calculations resurfaced with visceral clarity. He'd nearly forgotten that sensation. The razor's edge, sharp-focused problem-solving under pressure. It was merely luck, Arthur muttered, dismissing the praise. Fortune favors the prepared mind. Musk countered at a pause. Then, did you ever have any association with NASA, Arthur? The question struck Arthur like a physical blow. He nearly veered, regaining control just in time. His heart slammed against his ribs. How could he possibly? He swallowed, attempting to steady himself. What prompts that question? Musk shrugged, his gaze directed outside. A hunch. You possess a certain, a particular way of articulating yourself, and you display a surprising familiarity with orbital mechanics for a driver. Damned that he'd been too relaxed. His defenses had crumbled. I read extensively. Arthur offered, his voice strained. Popular science magazines, documentaries. Musk turned back, his eyes drilling into him. Enough prevarication. Arthur, I'm offering an opportunity here, a chance to engage in something meaningful, something of consequence. Arthur stared ahead, his knuckles bone-white. That word, meaningful, stung, implied that his current existence was without merit, a barren wasteland of faded ambition. Perhaps it was. Mr. Musk, Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. I appreciate the sentiment, but I lack the qualifications for whatever role you envision. That I'm simply a driver. That's utter rubbish, Arthur, and you are keenly aware of it. You are severely undervaluing your potential. Musk's tone edged towards impatience. I'm disinclined to engage in this charade that a simple yes or no will suffice. Arthur's thoughts scrambled. The sterile confines of the Uber waiting area flashed through his mind. The endless procession of fares, the slow erosion of his spirit. Then, another image. The fiery plume of a rocket, the infinite expanse of space, the compelling challenge of surpassing human limitations. That he drew a deep breath. What specific task do you have in mind? Musk smiled, a rare, almost youthful grin that illuminated his features. I require assistance in resolving a predicament, a rather significant predicament, involving the successful transport of humans to Mars and, ideally, ensuring their continued survival. Arthur blinked. Mars, a concept he hadn't entertained in years, decades, perhaps. The aspirations he'd nurtured, the calculations he'd obsessed over, the countless nights spent gazing at the star-strewn sky. All seemed vestiges of a distant existence. I haven't been involved in that sector for an extended period, Arthur said, his voice tinged with hesitation. The field has evolved drastically. Technology has advanced exponentially. That's precisely why your contribution is invaluable, Musk said, his voice imbued with urgency. You possess an understanding of the underlying principles, the foundational knowledge, the experience, the intuition that we provide, the technological framework, that it's the ideal synthesis. He paused for effect. And quite frankly, Arthur, time is a luxury we cannot afford. Lives hang in the balance. This extends beyond mere academic pursuit. This is tangible. People are depending on us. A knot formed in Arthur's gut. He understood the risks, the stakes, the terrifying, electrifying sensation of standing on the brink of the extraordinary. He glanced at Musk, his face a canvas of determination and anxiety. He saw not solely a billionaire visionary, but a man consumed by unwavering fervor, willing to jeopardize everything in pursuit of the seemingly impossible. What transpired at NASA, Arthur? Musk asked, his voice softer now, almost compassionate. What compelled you to abandon that path? Arthur flinched inwardly. The question lingered, a leaden weight. He hadn't spoken of it in years. The humiliation, the regret, the suffocating burden of failure remained raw, unabated. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles ached. Running was no longer an option. He couldn't hide behind the virtual anonymity of the app. He took another deep breath, his throat constricting. It's a lengthy narrative, he began, barely audible, and not a particularly flattering one. I have time, Musk stated, his gaze unwavering. We all harbor secrets, Arthur. The key is what we choose to do with them. Arthur scrutinized Musk. He registered the intensity, the ambition, the almost frenetic energy, but he also perceived something else, a nascent glimmer of hope, the conviction that even someone like him, someone whose past was checkered with failure, could still contribute meaningfully. He continued, driving in silence for what seemed an age. All right, Arthur conceded finally, the word a mere whisper lost in the engine's hum. All right, I'll explain. He steeled himself. The floodgates were about to burst, releasing years of repressed memories. The SpaceX complex materialized ahead, a cluster of glistening structures that defied the very notion of gravity. Arthur realized his life was on the cusp of irreversible change. The Uber chapter was drawing to a close. Whether for better or worse, remained to be seen. From Apollo to Uber. Apollo, Arthur began, the name lingering like the ghost of a launchpad roar. He adjusted the rearview mirror, less to observe Elon than to deflect the intensity of his stare. Beyond the glass, Los Angeles throbbed with the pulse of twilight, neon veins and arteries of crimson taillights. I had the privilege, I suppose, of being there at the genesis. Navigation was my realm. Silence stretched, a drawn bowstring. Elon sat motionless, a stillness that somehow amplified the city's clamor. The moon wasn't only about footprints and flags planted. Arthur continued, his voice finding a steadier timbre. It was a crucible of trigonometry, celestial mechanics, and the ever-present dread that a single miscalculation could strand those men, orbiting a desolate sphere for eternity. He evoked the roomful of whirring, blinking computers, slide rules pushed to their breaking points, the frenetic energy that coursed through mission control. He spoke of the crushing weight of responsibility, the sleepless vigils, the relentless pursuit of flawless execution. He conjured a picture of a team bound by a singular, audacious objective, achieving the impossible against overwhelming odds. We forged the systems from the ground up, Arthur stated, a spark of pride igniting in his tone. No GPS, no sophisticated algorithms, just raw, unbridled ingenuity. Every conceivable eventuality had to be foreseen, every possible failure mitigated, that we layered safeguard upon safeguards because lives hung in the balance. He lapsed into silence, the kaleidoscope of urban light reflecting in the depths of his fatigued eyes. Finally, Elon broke the quietude. And that's the void you're trying to fill, isn't it? That imperative? Arthur didn't offer a direct reply. Instead, a mirthless chuckle escaped him. Purpose, yes, and a generous helping of frustration. By the time Apollo concluded, I'd become disenchanted. The bureaucratic mire, the political gamesmanship, the endless committees, that IT felt like a betrayal of what we'd accomplished. He recounted the battles over budgets, the defunding, the pivot away from exploration to something less inspiring, more mundane. That he described meetings where innovation took a back seat to balance sheets. NASA grew risk-averse, Arthur observed, bitterness seeping back into his voice. Perhaps understandably, but the spirit of Apollo, the thirst to shatter limits, to embrace the inherent perils of the unknown, vanished, replaced by endless reports and PowerPoint presentations. Elon listened, unwavering. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So you walked away? Arthur nodded. I couldn't endure it any longer. The flame had sputtered out. That I tried to reignite it, proposing novel ventures, alternative strategies. But you understand, the machine rumbles on, regardless of who's shoveling coal. He executed a lane change, a seamless maneuver through the congested streets. Elon watched, his thoughts evidently racing. "I comprehend," Elon affirmed, his voice a low rumble. "Bureaucracy is the nemesis of progress that IT chokes innovation, stifles creativity, transforms visionaries into accountants." He paused. "That's why SpaceX is different, that we court risk, that we don't fear setbacks. We dissect them, that we recognize that scaling truly monumental heights necessitates pushing beyond perceived horizons." Arthur glanced at him, a flicker of skepticism in his gaze. "Easier said than done when you're not accountable to Congress." Elon's smile widened, a predatory flash of the ambition that burned beneath his urbane facade. "Indeed, but we still grapple with tremendous obstacles. Technical challenges, financial constraints, the sheer audacity of our aim. Reaching Mars will be a Herculean task, that IT will demand the sharpest minds, the most groundbreaking solutions, the unwavering commitment of a team driven by passion." He paused, his gaze locking with Arthur's. "And that's where you re-enter the equation, Arthur." Arthur sighed, his past a heavy mantle. "Mr. Musk, I appreciate the gesture, truly, but I doubt I'm a man you need. I'm past my prime, disconnected, and, frankly, a touch cynical." Elon waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. You bring decades of hard-won expertise, an innate comprehension of navigation, and a demonstrably successful legacy that you've witnessed what it takes to place humans on the lunar surface. That knowledge is priceless." He retrieved his phone, his thumbs dancing across the screen, seemingly oblivious to Arthur's misgivings. "We're confronting some unforeseen complications with trajectory calculations for the Mars mission that we've conducted simulations, scrutinized the data from every angle. Yet something feels off, that a subtle aberration we can't quite isolate." He glanced up, his eyes alight with a fervent glint. "It's driving our engineers to distraction. They're brilliant minds, without question, but they're too immersed in the minutiae. They require fresh eyes, someone who can grasp the overarching perspective." He returned to his phone, his fingers blurring across the glass. "I'm scheduling a meeting for tomorrow morning, 10 sharp, at SpaceX headquarters. That I expect you there, Arthur." Arthur began to protest, but Elon cut him off. "Just attend the briefing, examine the data, converse with the team. That if you remain unconvinced, I'll concede, but I have a conviction, a powerful one, that you possess precisely what we require." He looked up, his expression earnest. "Consider it, Arthur. This extends beyond constructing rockets. This is about expanding the boundaries of human understanding, about broadening our reach, about ensuring the continuance of our species. It's about inspiring future generations of researchers, technologists, and explorers." He paused, then added, "It's about vindication, Arthur, an opportunity to revise history, to demonstrate that you still have something invaluable to impart to the world." Arthur's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles stark white. The word vindication hung in the air, laden with unspoken significance. He knew Elon spoke the truth. He possessed knowledge, experience, an unwavering drive to matter. But he also carried a secret, a corrosive stain from his past he'd long tried to bury. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly parched. What was the time for the meeting again? Elon smiled, a triumphant, perceptive smile. 10 o'clock sharp, and dressed casually that IT could be a long day. The Uber app chimed, signaling another request. Arthur ignored it. He was no longer merely a driver. He was transformed. Something greater. He couldn't foresee the future. But for the first time in years, he detected a shimmer of hope. A spark of possibility. He glanced at Elon in the back. "Very well, Mr. Musk. You have a deal. But be warned, I don't pull any punches." Elon chuckled. "That's precisely what I'm counting on, Arthur. Precisely what I'm counting on." As they continued through the dazzling cityscape, Arthur couldn't quell the sensation that he was on the cusp of something consequential, something with the potential to reshape his existence, and perhaps even the world. The route ahead was uncertain, fraught with difficulty and hazard. But for the first time in a long while, Arthur Penhaligon felt truly alive. an offer he can't refuse. So Arthur Musk began leaning back. The waning sun painted the office, all chrome and stark lines in gold, ready to exhume those archaic calculators and help us conquer Mars. Arthur squirmed. The panorama of SpaceX rockets, ordinarily inspiring, pressed in, a tangible reminder of his failures, his inadequacy. He worried a fraying edge on his tweed jacket, a relic of a different era. Mr. Musk, with respect, I'm ferrying passengers between brunch spots and yoga studios now. My slide rule probably anchors some unfortunate seagull somewhere. And truth be told, the last time I wrestled with trajectory calculations, things deviated from the flight plan, shall we say. Musk's gaze, piercing and unwavering, held firm. Apollo 13 was history, Arthur. While I acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, wallowing in yesterday won't propel us toward tomorrow. Besides, a flicker of amusement crossed his face. That was a systemic breakdown, not solely a numerical error. You're the best mind I could unearth for this particular conundrum, and I want you engaged. Consider this a new launch. A clean launch pad? Arthur's chuckle was a dry rustle. That's charitable, Mr. Musk, but I'm not sure I'm the right astronaut for this flight. The technology has leaped forward that I'm an analog relic in a digital age. Hogwash, Musk dismissed with a wave. The core principles remain. And frankly, a seasoned perspective, a touch of old-school ingenuity, is often the antidote to overcomplicated systems. The current architecture is buried under layers of abstraction. You identified the core issue. You intuit the solution that we need your experience to pare it back, to distill it down. He tinted his fingers, his eyes boring in. Look, Arthur, let's dispense with pleasantries that I require your assistance, and I'm prepared to compensate you handsomely. Significantly better than your earnings, shuttling Pilates enthusiasts, I assure you. Arthur stiffened subtly at the barb, but the proposal hummed with undeniable allure. The prospect of re-entering the space race, of playing a part in something magnificent, had been a smoldering coal in his heart for years. But fear, the suffocating weight of past missteps, was a frozen shroud damping the embers. I appreciate the offer, sincerely, but this isn't merely about remuneration, that it's about accountability. The lives of the astronauts are involved, that I couldn't live with myself if... His voice trailed off, choked by unspoken anxieties. Lives are the immutable currency of exploration, Arthur. Musk countered, his tone softening. That's inherent to the endeavor. But we mitigate the dangers, that we build resilience in our systems, that we conduct rigorous testing and learn from past events. And we require individuals like you, possessing intimate knowledge of potential hazards, to minimize them. He paused. Consider it an opportunity for vindication. Arthur, demonstrate to yourself and to the world that the spark of genius still flickers. This transcends merely reaching Mars. It's about lasting impact, about inscribing your name in the annals of history. That wouldn't you desire to be a part of that narrative? Legacy lingered, heavy with implication. Arthur had spent recent decades attempting to erase his own, to retreat into obscurity and bury the past. But the prospect of contributing something genuinely worthwhile, of etching his name among the stars for the right reasons, held considerable sway. He raked a hand through thinning hair, his mind a whirlwind. He saw the faces of the Apollo 13 crew. Naked terror reflected in their eyes. He envisioned the Martian landscape, crimson dust swirling beneath. The wheels of future explorers, the promise of discovery. Precisely what would the assignment entail? He managed, barely audible, that Musk's face brightened. Initially, consulting that we need your insights on the existing trajectory models, to pinpoint vulnerabilities, and to propose refinements that you'll have unrestricted data access, all necessary tools that you'll collaborate with our team, but retain the latitude to explore your own avenues. And the schedule. Expedited. Our target launch window is within 2 years. Readiness is paramount. Arthur hesitated, riveted by the distant launch pad. 2 years, to make a demonstrable difference, to either achieve triumphantly or fail dramatically. The stakes loomed incredibly high. He pictured his cramped quarters, Endless hours in the driver's seat of his aging car, the sense of utter insignificance. He considered the opportunities arrayed before him. The possibility of rekindling a dormant passion, of contributing to something consequential, of finally quieting his inner demons. "All right," he declared, firmer this time. "I'll accept." Musk flashed a grin, genuine enthusiasm flickering across his features. "Excellent, that I knew you wouldn't disappoint. We'll expedite the paperwork. Commencement is next week." Arthur nodded, a volatile mix of anticipation and apprehension churning within. He had just committed to plunging back into the abyss, confronting his ghosts, wagering everything on a quest to Mars. "There's one stipulation," Arthur added, a flinty edge to his tone. Musk raised an eyebrow. "Indeed, unfettered access to bureaucratic detours. No political meddling. That I must have the freedom to voice my opinions, to challenge protocols. That if I perceive a flaw, I need the ability to address it directly, bypassing layers of authorization." Musk deliberated, his expression unreadable. "Acceptable. That I value your forthrightness, Arthur, and I respect your expertise. That you'll have my complete backing." But his eyes narrowed slightly. "That also entails accountability. Should setbacks occur, you'll bear responsibility." Arthur met his gaze squarely, unwavering. "I wouldn't expect otherwise." Exiting Musk's office, the dipping sun cast attenuated shadows across the rocket yard. The air vibrated with activity, the electric charge of innovation, the promise of the uncharted. He moved with newfound purpose, his stride lighter than it had been in decades. Doubt lingered, fear whispered, but hope also blossomed. The hope of redemption, of contributing something genuinely extraordinary, of finally making peace with his past. He retrieved his phone and canceled his Uber shifts for the week. Time to resurrect dormant skills and prepare for the defining journey of his life. The path to Mars would be arduous, but for the first time in years, Arthur felt aligned with his destination. He could only pray he wouldn't crash and burn before achieving orbit. He glanced back at SpaceX headquarters, gleaming spires ascending toward the heavens. This was it, his second chance, an offer too compelling to decline, a challenge too potent to resist. He simply had to ensure he didn't squander it. The stakes, this time, were astronomical. Old school versus new school. The supercharger's thrum, a mechanical aria of aspiration, resonated through the colossal SpaceX hangar. Briefcase clutched tight, Arthur felt diminished by the gleaming immensity of the Falcon Heavy booster, a monument to extraterrestrial ambition. He'd swapped the familiar confines of his hybrid for this temple of escape. The contrast stung. He was ushered into the presence of Dr. Anya Sharma, the lead trajectory analyst. Her grip was decisive, her gaze penetrating, measuring him with unsettling intensity. "Mr. Penhaligon," she stated, her tone crisp, efficient. "Welcome to SpaceX. We appreciate you accepting our invitation to consult." The word hung between them, a thinly veiled challenge to demonstrate his value. Anya guided him through a labyrinth of workstations, each a buzzing epicenter of code and simulated detonations flickering on panoramic displays. The atmosphere vibrated with kinetic energy, a stark departure from the deliberate tempo of his NASA tenure. He observed additive printers layering components, articulated arms assembling intricate matrices, and engineers, young enough to be his kin, debating algorithms with. Fierce conviction that IT was both invigorating and unnerving. "This is Raj Patel," Anya announced, indicating a young man sporting thick-framed spectacles and an open, welcoming smile. "Raj is one of our top talents. He'll be your point of contact." Raj offered his hand. "It's an honor, Mr. Penhaligon. Your papers on orbital mechanics are required reading. Truly landmark work." Arthur permitted a subtle, involuntary smile to surface. "Thank you, Raj, but those papers are rather dated, I'm afraid." "Dated, perhaps, but fundamental," Raj countered with unbridled enthusiasm. "We still use some of your equations as cornerstones." Anya interjected with a refined, throat-clearing. "Raj will familiarize you with our current models and simulation platforms." She redirected her attention to Arthur. We're operating under significant time constraints, Mr. Penhaligon. Our goal is to launch within the next 24 months. 2 years in his era that barely afforded the time to finalize initial reports. I appreciate the urgency, Arthur responded, his voice carefully even. However, haste can beget error, and in this endeavor, miscalculations are prohibitively expensive. Anya's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. We're acutely aware of the inherent risks, Mr. Penhaligon, that we mitigate them through scrupulous testing and iterative refinement. Evolve through experimentation is our guiding principle. Arthur's brow furrowed. Evolve through experimentation. That's a singular perspective. He preferred meticulous forethought, exhaustive virtual drills, and a prudent dose of circumspection. The mantra sounded reckless, almost blasphemous. Raj, sensing the undercurrent of discord, interjected. We utilize agile methodologies. Mr.Penhaligon.it enables us to adapt swiftly to emergent data and unforeseen complications. Arthur nodded slowly, absorbing the concept. I understand. Well, I'm eager to learn. Yet, inwardly, a tightening of anxiety coiled within his core. He felt like a relic amidst a digital renaissance. The ensuing days dissolved into a haze of unfamiliar acronyms, software demonstrations, and relentless meetings. Arthur repeatedly requested elucidation. His carefully phrased queries met with courteous yet thinly veiled impatience. The team employed simulations utterly foreign to him, utilizing processing capabilities that would have been unfathomable in his heyday. They refined prototypes in a matter of hours, a process that once consumed weeks. He was adrift in a deluge of information. Struggling for purchase point one afternoon, he intercepted Raj after a particularly disorienting briefing. Raj, there's something I need to grasp. That you're running these simulations, amassing terabytes of data, but are you actually considering the fundamental physics at play? Raj looked surprised by the query. Of course, Mr. Penhaligon, that we employ sophisticated algorithms to model every facet of the trajectory. Algorithms are only as reliable as their underlying assumptions, Arthur retorted. Have you factored in the effects of solar flares on the ionosphere, the gravitational anomalies surrounding Mars? Raj hesitated momentarily. Those are integrated into the models, Mr. Penhaligon. Integrated or superficially addressed? Arthur pressed. These are enormously intricate systems. One cannot simply deluge them with data and expect the solutions to materialize ex nihilo. One must grasp the governing principles. Raj's earlier exuberance seemed to wane subtly. We have faith in the models, Mr. Penhaligon. They've undergone rigorous validation. That evening, Anya discovered Arthur fixated on a whiteboard adorned with equations, a vestige of his NASA days. That he appeared utterly bewildered. Enjoying the intellectual exercise, Mr. Penhaligon? She inquired, her tone tinged with sarcasm. Arthur sighed deeply. I'm endeavoring to comprehend your models, Dr. Sharma, but frankly, I harbor concerns. They strike me as unrealistically optimistic. Optimistic? Anya scoffed. They're grounded in empirical data, Mr. Penhaligon. Years of exhaustive investigation and development. Data devoid of comprehension is merely static, Arthur countered. You're placing undue reliance on the computers, not enough on your own insight. Anya's expression hardened perceptibly. With all due respect, Mr. Penhaligon, insight alone won't deliver us to Mars. Rigorous analysis and pioneering technology will. Technology is a tool, not a substitute for critical acumen, Arthur emphasized. I've witnessed the ramifications of blindly trusting machines. People suffer. Anya's gaze softened ever so slightly, a fleeting glimmer of understanding flickering within her eyes. I am aware of your past experience, Mr. Penhaligon, but this is fundamentally different. That we've absorbed the lessons from those blunders. We have robust safeguards in place. Safeguards are only as effective as their creators, Arthur persisted. And if those individuals are so infatuated with their technological prowess that they neglect the bedrock principles, those safeguards are rendered useless. Anya crossed her arms defensively. Look, Mr. Penhaligon, I acknowledge your misgivings. However, we're on a demanding timeline. We cannot afford to challenge every calculation that we must trust our simulations and proceed forward. And what if the simulations are flawed? Arthur inquired, his voice hushed and grave. What then? Anya averted her gaze, her carefully maintained composure fracturing subtly. We cannot afford for them to be flawed, she murmured almost imperceptibly. Arthur perceived the crushing weight of the mission upon her shoulders, the unrelenting pressure to succeed. He grasped the magnitude of what was at stake. Yet he also recognized the peril of complacency, the beguiling temptation of technological hubris. Then we must ensure their accuracy, he asserted, his voice resolute. Even if it necessitates deceleration, even if it mandates questioning everything. Anya scrutinized him intently for a prolonged moment, her countenance indecipherable. Fine, she conceded at last. But you will have to substantiate your claims, Mr. Penhaligon. You'll have to demonstrate that your old-school methodologies surpass our new-school approach, and you will have to accomplish this swiftly. She pivoted and departed, leaving Arthur alone with his equations and his apprehensions. He knew he faced a formidable challenge. He had to devise a strategy to bridge the chasm between the past and the present, to persuade these brilliant young minds that experience retained its value, that instinct still warranted a place in the age of algorithms. The destiny of the Mars endeavor, and perhaps his own absolution, hinged upon it. He picked up his chalk. There was work to be done, the starship's flaw. The holographic display jittered, an erratic constellation of projected paths that stubbornly refused to coalesce above the crimson Martian dust. A film of perspiration slicked Anya's brow, gluing stray tendrils of dark hair to her forehead. 72 hours. For 72 relentless hours, they had pursued this elusive anomaly, this insidious hiccup in the landing algorithms that threatened to dash Starship against the jagged walls of Valles Marineris. Recomputing the descent sequence for the 15th time, Raj declared, his voice strained, the whites of his eyes inflamed, reflecting the cold light of the monitors. Still getting the same divergence, a 0.7-degree discrepancy from the ideal approach. Anya tapped the console, a gesture of contained fury. Raj, on Earth, 0.7 degrees is a slightly rough touchdown. On Mars, with that wispy excuse for an atmosphere, it spells disaster. Elon Musk's likeness flickered onto the primary screen, sharp and demanding. His location, Boca Chica, overseeing the latest Starship prototype trials. Sharma, report, we're hemorrhaging daylight, the launch windows shrinking. Anya drew herself up, forcing a veneer of composed professionalism into her tone. Elon, we've encountered an unforeseen irregularity in the entry simulations. The retro burn is consistently veering off the predicted course. Musk frowned, a deep crease forming between his eyebrows. Veering? What sort of veering? And why the hell hasn't it been rectified? It's a landing, Sharma, not some arcane science that we've nailed landings hundreds of times. It's intricate, Elon. The models account for atmospheric conditions, gravitational pull, topographical data, everything imaginable. Yet a persistent variance remains that we've exhausted every parameter, every formula. Nothing reconciles. The silence emanating from Musk was a tangible weight. Anya almost felt the pressure radiating off the screen. Eventually, he spoke, his voice a low rumble. I need solutions, Sharma, not rationalizations. That I've entrusted you with the foremost team, the finest resources. You need to deliver. Lives depend on this mission. His image winked out. Anya kneaded her temples, feeling the weight of collective hopes bearing down on her. She glanced at her team, their faces mirroring her own frustration and weariness. Geniuses, the best minds in the industry. And yet, they were stymied. All right, she stated, a steely edge returning to her voice. Back to fundamentals. Raj, retrieve the unfiltered telemetry from the last stratospheric test. Forget the blasted simulations for the moment. Let's dissect the real-world data. Raj nodded, His fingers dancing across the keyboard, he conjured a series of graphs and charts, charting the starship's actual performance during its descent. Anya scrutinized the data, searching for some hidden clue, some aberration that might illuminate the discrepancy. Hours dissolved into a continuous loop of data crunching, hypothesis formulation, and blind alleys. The air hung thick with the bitter tang of stale coffee and mounting desperation. Outside, the desert sun plunged below the horizon, painting the canvas of the sky with vibrant strokes of orange and vermilion. A stark contrast to the frigid, clinical atmosphere within the control room. At last, Raj emitted a groan of pure frustration. I am at a loss. The data is pristine. Everything is functioning within expected parameters. A wave of despair washed over Anya. Time was ebbing away. Then, a spark ignited in her mind, a nagging doubt she had been suppressing, something Arthur had voiced during their earlier disagreement. Simulations mirror the flaws in the data they're fed. They are inherently incapable of accounting for the unknown unknowns. She hesitated. Could he be right? Was there some overlooked variable, some fundamental element that their sophisticated algorithms were failing to capture? It felt like conceding defeat, abandoning her own meticulously crafted approach. But the alternative was unthinkable. Raj, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Access the data for atmospheric drag coefficient that I need to observe how it fluctuates with altitude. Raj regarded her with surprise. But we've already integrated that into the calculations that we're operating with the newest models, the most precise data available. Just do it, Anya snapped, her patience fraying. Raj obeyed, summoning a visual representation of atmospheric drag coefficient's relationship with altitude. Anya focused intently on the graph, her gaze sharpening. Something didn't add up. Hold on, she said, indicating a specific segment of the curve. What's this? There's a subtle depression in the drag coefficient at approximately 10,000 meters. Raj peered at the screen. Affirmative, but that's within acceptable limits. Just a minor fluctuation due to variations in air composition. But how minor? Anya insisted. Magnify that section. Give me the granular values. Raj zoomed in, exposing the numbers on the screen. Anya inhaled sharply. The reduction in the drag coefficient was demonstrably larger than their simulations had accounted for. That's it, she exclaimed, adrenaline coursing through her. That's the hitch. We've been miscalculating the influence of this atmospheric distortion on the landing procedure. Raj stared, his eyes widening with comprehension. But how can that be? We've been using standard atmosphere projections. Standard projections aren't infallible, Anya countered, her mind whirling. They're predicated on averages on legacy datasets. The Martian atmosphere, however, is a dynamic system, perpetually in flux, and this alteration, this dip in the drag coefficient, is sufficient to destabilize the descent path. She addressed the team, her voice resonating with renewed resolve. Okay, people, listen closely that we need to recalibrate the simulations using the observed drag coefficient data from the recent test flight. We must incorporate this atmospheric peculiarity into the retro burn sequence. Now let's get to work. The room crackled with renewed activity. Team members, their weariness momentarily banished, plunged back into their tasks, fingers flying. Anya felt a resurgence of hope. They had identified the flaw. Now, they just needed to remedy it as the team labored. Anya's thoughts drifted to Arthur, his unwavering emphasis on the supremacy of fundamental physical principles, his skepticism regarding simulations that he had perceived something they had overlooked, something their sophisticated models had failed to capture. She recognized the course of action she needed to take. She picked up her comm and dialed Arthur's number. IT rolled to voicemail. Anya left a message. Arthur, Anya here, we need to connect. You were insightful. She paused, swallowing her pride. Perhaps the tried-and-true methodologies aren't so antiquated after all. Meanwhile, Musk paced in Boca Chica, frustrated. His phone beeped at IT was Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, requesting an update on the Mars endeavor. Musk, in no position to divulge the issues plaguing the Starship's descent system, truncated the conversation that he needed solutions, not distractions. Back in Hawthorne, as the first rays of dawn painted the windows, Anya observed as the corrected simulations finally converged on the target landing zone. The trajectory lines, once erratic, now formed a cohesive, precise path toward the Martian surface. Raj turned to her, his face alight. "We did it, Dr. Sharma. We resolved the problem." Anya smiled, a genuine expression that lit up her features. They had overcome the issue. They had salvaged the mission. But she knew that this was merely a precursor. The real challenge awaited on the red planet itself. And she had a feeling that Arthur Penhaligon would play a pivotal role in what transpired next. Apollo wisdom. The silence descended like a lead curtain as Arthur cleared his throat. A sheen of perspiration beaded on his scalp under the harsh glare of the overhead lights. Every eye in the conference room was fixed on him. Anya, Raj, a clutch of other engineers, all bright young minds, brimming, he suspected, with doubt. Right then, he began, his voice betraying a tremor. Anya's group delivered a stellar analysis of the atmospheric disturbance. However, even with that improved data, the revised drag calculations only offer a sliver more leeway in the landing envelope. Accurate? Anya offered a curt nod, her face a mask of concern. "A sliver is all we got, Arthur. Still too dicey for a crewed flight." Arthur gestured, his hands, etched with the history of slide rules and educated guesses, open in supplication. "We need a paradigm shift, or perhaps a return to one." He paused, letting the notion sink in. Apollo. Raj Patel shifted, a barely suppressed eye roll the only outward sign of his thoughts. Arthur didn't miss it. Asterisk, here comes the dinosaur. Waxing nostalgic. Asterisk, he imagined them thinking. "With all due respect, Arthur," Anya started, her tone calibrated for diplomacy. "Apollo-era landing tech. It's hardly state-of-the-art. We're dealing with Starship here, a fully reusable vertical landing vehicle, a completely different animal." "Understood, Anya," Arthur rejoined, his voice gaining fortitude. "But the core problem persists that you're battling atmospheric vagaries during that critical final descent." The lunar module faced similar demons, albeit in a far less dense medium. He tapped the remote. The screen flickered, revealing not a rendering of Starship, but a detailed schematic of the Apollo lunar module. A ripple of hushed surprise, laced with amusement, spread through the room. "My proposal involves a modification to Starship's retropropulsion," Arthur elucidated, indicating points on the diagram. "Instead of relying exclusively on the belly-mounted Raptors for terminal deceleration, we integrate a ring of smaller, gimbaled thrusters strategically positioned, higher along the hull. Think of them as supercharged attitude control. A rocket skirt, essentially?" Raj interjected, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Not a skirt, Raj, a precisely calibrated array," Arthur countered, a hint of gentle correction in his tone. "Firing in brief, modulated bursts. These engines would provide instantaneous corrections to the descent path, nullifying unforeseen gusts and turbulence at a delicate dance, not a heavy-handed stomp." Anya's brow furrowed as she scrutinized the diagram. "That entails significant structural alterations, new conduits, revised control architecture, increased mass. The weight addition is negligible compared to the benefit," Arthur insisted. "And the control algorithms can integrate with existing Starship software. We're not reinventing the wheel, just adapting it." A heavy quiet blanketed the room. Thick with misgivings, he could almost taste their apprehension. Quixotic fantasy. Utterly impractical. Retrograde thinking. A familiar wave of discouragement threatened to engulf him. Was he simply a relic, clinging to antiquated methods? He opened his mouth to further the case, but a buzz interrupted him in unknown number. Asterisk, Elon watching. Hold the line. X asterisk. He looked up, jolted. Anya remained absorbed in the schematic, her forehead creased in concentration. Taking a breath, squaring his shoulders, he pressed on. "I know this sounds unorthodox," Arthur continued, "but the Apollo program was more than just getting to the moon. It was about problem solving, about relentless innovation under pressure. Perfection wasn't always attainable, but we found ways to triumph. This isn't about Apollo worship. It's about applying enduring principles to a contemporary challenge. He elaborated, delineating the specific advantages of the modified retro-rocket configuration: enhanced stability, improved fuel economy, a wider margin for error in the final phase. Decades of experience lent resonance to his voice, carrying the unwavering belief that he was right. Anya listened intently, punctuating his monologue with incisive questions. Raj, surprisingly, began scribbling furiously, his initial skepticism seemingly giving way to wary interest. The other engineers remained inscrutable. Suddenly, the phone warbled, shattering the tension. Anya answered. "Sharma," she acknowledged, then a pause, her eyes widening. "Yes, sir, understood." She replaced the receiver, her complexion paling. "That was Elon," she announced, her voice strained. "He's been monitoring the presentation remotely. He wants us to give Arthur's proposal serious consideration." A low murmur coursed through the room that Elon's veiled approval carried enormous weight. He said. Anya continued, relaying Elon's words verbatim. "Sometimes the most elegant solutions are the ones collecting dust. Unearth the Apollo wisdom." Raj brightened. "Apollo wisdom. I like the sound of that. Beats ancient history any day." Anya sighed, rubbing her temples. "All right, team, let's run some simulations. See if Arthur's calibrated array has legs." She focused on Arthur, a flicker of something almost like respect in her gaze. "But I'm warning you, Arthur, if this is a fool's errand, you're buying the caffeine for the foreseeable future." Arthur grinned, a genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Deal, Dr. Sharma. But I have a hunch you won't be needing the jolt." The ensuing days devolved into a frenzy of activity. Arthur, fueled by stale coffee and a rekindled sense of purpose, labored tirelessly alongside Anya's team. He devoured blueprints, crunched numbers, and imparted his encyclopedic knowledge of retro-rocket dynamics. Raj, now an eager disciple, absorbed everything with alacrity, bombarding Arthur with inquiries and offering valuable perspectives. Initial simulations showed considerable promise. The modified retro-rocket configuration demonstrably improved Starship's stability during the critical descent, enlarging the landing envelope and mitigating the risk of a catastrophic event. The results were imperfect but encouraging. However, obstacles remained. Seamlessly integrating the new system into the existing Starship architecture proved more complicated than anticipated. The incremental weight gain, while small, still mandated adjustments to the overall flight profile. And perhaps most daunting of all, convincing the broader SpaceX engineering community that a solution born from 1960s technology could hold water in the 21st century. Arthur knew the road ahead was steep, but he also knew he had something to prove, not only to SpaceX, but to himself. Here was a chance to rewrite his legacy, to contribute to something truly groundbreaking, and he refused to let it slip through his fingers. One evening, after a particularly punishing day of simulations, Arthur found himself alone in the empty conference room, lost in contemplation of the lunar module schematic. A touch on his shoulder startled him. That IT was Anya. "Hey," she said, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "Just wanted to thank you for not backing down." Arthur nodded, a sudden tightness in his throat. "It's not over yet, Anya. There's still a long climb ahead." "I know," she replied, "but we're making headway. More than we were before you showed up." She paused, then added, almost reluctantly, "Elon's got a point. There's wisdom to be gleaned from the past. We just need to know where to dig." The test flight. Heat waves danced above the landing site, blurring the already fantastical form of the Starship prototype. A tremor, born not of the desert's oven-like air, but of mingled dread and elation, ran through Arthur's limbs. He lingered on the periphery, a deliberate choice. He felt like an antique, a relic briefly unearthed for an improbable encore. "Pressure's holding, Arthur." Anya's voice, sharp and steady, cut through his headset. He pictured her in mission control, her face illuminated by the glow of countless screens, the intensity of the situation belied by her usual stoic demeanor, and no doubt Elon was a hair's breadth from peering over her shoulder. "Acknowledged, Dr. Sharma," Arthur replied, his own voice a reedy whisper. He adjusted the headset volume, struggling for clarity. Around him, technicians bustled, performing final checks on the retro rocket assembly. His assembly, modified Apollo-era thrusters, resurrected and reimagined for a 21st century starship. He spotted Raj threading through the activity, a tablet glued to his hand, his brow creased in thought. Once Arthur's loudest critic, Raj was now a convert. Won over by the sheer elegance of the underlying physics, he observed Raj run a reverential hand along the casing of one thruster. The young engineer had spent the past week buried in Arthur's calculations, dissecting diagrams scrawled on everything from paper napkins to whiteboard walls. He debated, interrogated, challenged, and ultimately grasped the core principles that Arthur's gaze returned to the starship, its stainless steel surface ablaze under the desert sun. The modifications, the quartet of retro-rocket clusters nestled near the base, were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained. He'd been adamant about a system that wouldn't mar the ship's inherent design, a safety net rather than a wholesale redesign. Initiating ignition sequence, Anya announced. Anticipation hung thick in the air. Arthur inhaled sharply. This was the culmination. Weeks of simulations, calculations, disagreements, and concessions funneled into a single, pivotal juncture. Failure wouldn't just discredit his theory. It would negate a lifetime of expertise. The low thrum vibrated through the sand, steadily intensifying. Plumes of vapor vented from the starship's nozzles, a prelude to the symphony of controlled explosions about to begin. Arthur's chest constricted, a ghost of that long-ago disaster. He banished the memory, anchoring himself in the present, to the equations swirling in his mind, the fundamental laws that had guided him here. Engaging main engines. Anya's voice, now edged with perceptible strain. The rumble escalated into a thunderous roar. Slowly, majestically, the starship ascended, a silver dart piercing the vibrant cerulean sky. Arthur's eyes followed the ascent, trying to track the trajectory. Everything appeared ordinary, disconcertingly so. The true trial lay ahead. During the descent, when the retro rockets were scheduled to engage, stabilizing the craft, it was here that the simulations had shown the most promising results, where Arthur's solution offered a remedy for the instability that had plagued previous attempts. Minutes stretched, elastic with tension. The starship reached its intended altitude, poised for a heartbeat against the immensity of space, then commenced its return, beginning re-entry burn, Anya stated. Arthur detected the anxiety she struggled to mask, that he knew she was tracking every variable, every sensor reading, every deviation in the ship's path. The starship hurtled back towards the planet, a brilliant tail of fire streamed behind it, testament to the monumental forces at play. The heat shield radiated crimson, protecting the hull from the incandescent kiss of atmospheric friction. Telemetry indicates oscillation increasing. Raj's voice sliced through the comms, laced with concern. Wobble is within acceptable parameters, but Arthur squeezed his eyes shut for the briefest moment, summoning his composure. This was the moment of truth. Stand by to activate retro rockets, he instructed, his tone unwavering despite the churn in his gut. Awaiting your command, Arthur. Anya confirmed. He scrutinized the descent, the data scrolling in his mind's eye. The wobble was intensifying, threatening to upset the equilibrium. To send the craft spiraling out of control, he had to react, and decisively. Engage retro rockets, Cluster 1. Arthur ordered, his voice resonant with resolve. That a fraction of a second later, a staccato of sharp reports reverberated across the desert floor. 0.4 bursts of incandescent energy flared from the base of the starship, briefly bathing the surrounding landscape in an unearthly glow. The ship bucked, its descent noticeably decelerating. Cluster 1 engaged, Raj confirmed, his voice a mix of elation and apprehension subsiding. Oscillation decreasing. Arthur held his breath captive, his gaze riveted on the descending vessel. The wobble persisted, but it was diminishing, becoming less pronounced with each passing moment. The retro rockets were fulfilling their purpose, executing their meticulously planned dance. "Engage Cluster 2, Arthur commanded, his confidence growing. Again, the shark concussions, the incandescent blooms. The starship shuddered once more. Its descent further curtailed. "Cluster 2 engaged," Raj reported. Oscillation almost. Non-existent. Trajectory stable. A surge of relief flooded Arthur. So intense, it almost stole his balance. He gripped the railing before him. His knuckles stark white. IT had worked. IT had actually worked. The starship continued its descent, now a model of controlled motion, a testament to the blending of innovative technology and seasoned experience. The retro rockets pulsed intermittently, making minute corrections to its flight path, ensuring a soft and precise landing. Touchdown confirmed. Anya's voice, a jubilant cry, exploded across the comms. The control room erupted in a cacophony of cheers. Arthur permitted himself a restrained smile. He watched as the starship settled gracefully onto the landing pad, its engines sighing to silence. The ensuing quiet was almost overwhelming, punctuated only by the static of the radio and the distant calls of birds circling overhead. Raj rushed toward him, his face alight with excitement. "Arthur, that was incredible," the retro rockets performed. Flawlessly, the wobble eradicated. Arthur clapped Raj on the shoulder, a rare display of warmth. "We performed flawlessly, Raj.we." Elon's voice boomed through the comms, unfiltered and commanding. "Arthur, Anya, what in blazes just happened? Did your crazy antique contraption actually do the trick?" Anya responded first, her voice still vibrant with excitement. "Yes, Elon. The retro rocket system stabilized the descent perfectly. We achieved a controlled landing." A moment of hushed anticipation followed, a pregnant pause that seemed infinite. Then, Elon's voice, quieter now, almost contemplative. "Huh. Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. Guess there's something to be said for graybeards after all." Arthur allowed himself a genuine smile this time, a smile that radiated from deep within. Perhaps, just perhaps, he had finally found his absolution, not in the desolate expanse of space, but in the crucible of ingenuity, demonstrating that experience, even from a bygone era, still held value for the future that a new star is born. The roar of the crowd in Hawthorne still echoed in Arthur's ears, a stark contrast to the sterile silence of his apartment. He hadn't felt this alive, this relevant, in decades. His phone pinged incessantly, a barrage of congratulatory messages from SpaceX employees, old NASA colleagues he hadn't spoken to in years, even a few reporters sniffing around for an exclusive. He ignored them all, the adrenaline slowly draining. Leaving behind a familiar ache of weariness, he padded to the kitchen, the linoleum cold under his bare feet. The remnants of a hastily made celebratory dinner, a half-eaten microwave burrito and a lukewarm beer, sat on the counter. He tossed them in the trash, the metallic clang a lonely sound in the quiet apartment. He needed sleep, but his mind was a whirlwind of equations, trajectories, and the surprisingly smooth burn of the retro rockets. The next morning, Arthur arrived at SpaceX, bracing himself. He half expected to be greeted with either hero worship or resentful silence. What he found was a respectful curiosity. People nodded as he walked by, some offering hesitant smiles. Even the younger engineers, the ones who usually treated him like a museum exhibit, seemed genuinely interested in his presence. He found Raj waiting for him near the simulation lab, his face alight with nervous energy. "Dr. Penhaligon, sir, that was incredible. The way you adjusted the firing sequence, compensating for the wobble. I ran the simulations myself afterwards. Your solution was elegant." Arthur managed a weary smile. Just Arthur, Raj, and elegant is a word I haven't heard applied to my work in a long time. Raj's enthusiasm was infectious. But the simulations barely scratched the surface of the problem. They just kept spitting out error codes. Your experience, the feel you had for the system, that's what saved it. Simulation is a valuable tool, Raj, but can't replace intuition, Arthur said. It's important to know when to trust your gut, when to trust the physics you've learned over years. I want to learn that. How do you develop that feel? Raj asked, his eyes wide with genuine interest. Arthur considered him for a moment. He saw in Raj a reflection of his younger self, eager, brilliant, but lacking the hard-won wisdom that only experience could provide. Maybe, just maybe, he could pass on some of that knowledge. All right, Raj, Arthur said. Meet me here tomorrow. That will start with the basics and simulations. Just chalk, a whiteboard, and a healthy dose of Newtonian mechanics. Raj's face lit up. Really? That would be amazing. That afternoon, Arthur found himself in a meeting with Elon and several senior engineers. The atmosphere was noticeably different. The dismissive glances were gone, replaced by attentive nods. Elon, ever the showman, clapped Arthur on the back. Arthur, you magnificent bastard. You pulled it off. The old ways, huh? Sometimes the classics are the best. Elon then launched into a rapid-fire discussion about integrating Arthur's retro rocket system into the next Starship prototype, throwing around terms like redundancy, fail-safe, and game-changer. Arthur listened patiently. Interjecting with occasional clarifications and suggestions, he noticed Anya observing him from across the table, her expression unreadable. Later, as the meeting dispersed, Anya approached him. She looked tired, the weight of responsibility etched on her face. Arthur, can I have a word? He followed her to a quiet corner of the room, overlooking the sprawling SpaceX campus. The California sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I wanted to apologize, Anya said, her voice low. I was wrong. I underestimated you. Your experience, your unconventional approach, it was crucial that I was so focused on the simulations, on the data, that I missed the bigger picture. Arthur nodded slowly. It's all right, Anya, that we all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them. I'm learning, she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. And thank you for proving me wrong, for saving the mission. He simply nodded. The apology, sincere and heartfelt, meant more than any accolades. He felt a sliver of the old ambition, the old confidence, returning. The next morning, Raj was waiting for him, armed with a box of colored chalk. They spent the next few hours hunched over a whiteboard, Arthur explaining the intricacies of retro rocket design, the nuances of atmospheric drag, the delicate dance between thrust and gravity. Raj, initially hesitant to challenge Arthur's assumptions, gradually began to ask probing questions, offering his own insights. Think of it like this, Raj, Arthur said, sketching a diagram on the board. The atmosphere is a turbulent ocean that you're a surfer trying to ride the perfect wave. The simulations can tell you the size and direction of the wave, but they can't tell you how to feel the board beneath your feet, how to anticipate the next swell. Raj chewed on the end of his pen, his brow furrowed in concentration. So, it's about developing an intuitive understanding of the physics, not just memorizing the equations. Exactly, Arthur exclaimed, clapping Raj on the shoulder. It's about internalizing the principles, making them second nature. That's what allows you to react instinctively, to make those split-second decisions that can mean the difference between success and failure. As the days turned into weeks, Arthur and Raj spent hours together, dissecting old NASA reports, poring over blueprints, and conducting simple, hands-on experiments. Arthur shared stories of his time at NASA, recounting both his successes and his failures. He didn't sugarcoat the past, admitting his mistakes, explaining the lessons he had learned the hard way. Raj, in turn, shared his own aspirations, his dreams of building a better future for humanity, that he spoke of his desire to use his engineering skills to solve some of the world's most pressing problems, from climate change to poverty. Arthur was impressed by Raj's passion, his unwavering belief in the power of technology to make a difference. One evening, as they were packing up after a particularly long session, Raj turned to Arthur, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, Dr. Penhaligon, Arthur, before all this, I thought space exploration was just about data and calculations. That I thought that experience was something you could just simulate. Arthur smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "And what do you think now, Raj?" "Now," Raj said, "I realize that it's about more than that. It's about intuition, about judgment, about having the courage to trust your instincts. And it's about passing that knowledge on to the next generation." Arthur looked at Raj, his eyes shining with youthful enthusiasm. He saw a spark, a potential that reminded him of his younger self. He realized that his own journey wasn't just about redeeming his past failures. It was about investing in the future, about helping to shape the next generation of space explorers. And in that moment, Arthur Penhaligon knew that he had found his purpose once more, that he wasn't just a relic of the past. He was a bridge to the future, that he was a teacher, a mentor, a guide. And perhaps, in a way, a new star was born. The rival offer. The acrid tang of scorched coffee permeated Arthur's overcoat as he trudged across the SpaceX lot. Oversleeping had become a grim ritual, leaving him wrestling with echoes of lunar missions and the specter of booster malfunctions. Yet, today, a subdued unease replaced the usual sharp anxiety, a debt he owed to Raj. Witnessing the young engineer's face illuminate with nascent understanding as they grappled with a thorny problem proved more restorative than any therapy session. He was nearing the entrance when a charcoal gray SUV, as stealthy as it was opulent, purred to a halt beside him. The tinted window whispered down, revealing Marcus Thorne, CEO of Ares Dynamics. A vision of composed power, Thorne's suit seemed sculpted by a master tailor, his hair a testament to meticulous grooming, a world apart from Arthur's disheveled state. "Penhaligon," Thorne's voice resonated with practiced authority. "What a surprise to encounter you here, or perhaps not so surprising, considering your circumstances." A mirthless smile tightened his lips. Arthur halted, a familiar dread coiling in his gut. "Thorne, what brings you here?" "Merely a conversation regarding your current professional setting. It's hardly confidential that SpaceX thrives on pressure. Relentless hours, unpredictable leadership. Scarcely ideal for a seasoned expert such as yourself." Arthur folded his arms. "I'm coping." Thorne emitted a dry chuckle. "Coping? Or simply enduring? Ares Dynamics has been tracking your recent contributions. Quite remarkable, particularly given the vintage equipment at your disposal." Arthur's hackles rose. "Vintage? My equipment averted disaster." "Precisely. And for that, you warrant better. We are constructing a next-generation Mars habitat, Penhaligon. Cutting edge, entirely self-sufficient, that we require someone possessing your innate grasp of orbital mechanics. One who perceives beyond the digital simulations." Thorne paused, allowing his proposition to resonate. "We are prepared to extend a considerable salary enhancement, stock incentives, and a consultancy after the habitat's commission. Assured stability, Arthur, unlike the perpetual instability of relying on Musk's capricious decisions." Arthur felt a subtle tug, a primal urge toward the sanctuary Thorne portrayed, certain and more bleary nights fueled by stale coffee and gnawing apprehension, and more battling a deluge of simulations that felt increasingly alien. But then, Raj's image surfaced, his face incandescent as they dissected the landing protocols. He recalled the satisfying click of long-dormant knowledge snapping into place, resolving a dilemma that had perplexed a battalion of doctorates. "I'm at a loss for words, Thorne," Arthur responded, his tone surprisingly firm. "Consider it. Penhaligon, SpaceX embodies risk. Ares Dynamics represents certainty, an opportunity to forge something enduring, devoid of the ever-present cloud of potential failure." Thorne presented a card. "My personal contact number. Call me at your convenience. This proposition won't remain indefinitely available." The SUV slipped away, leaving Arthur rooted to the spot, the card feeling like a lead weight in his palm. He scrutinized it. The Ares Dynamics emblem. A stylized red planet with a pristine habitat crowning its surface. A silent taunt. He jammed the card into his pocket and continued toward the building. His mind a tumultuous vortex of conflicted emotions. He yearned for the refuge Thorne dangled, the acknowledgement, the chance to finally lay his anxieties to rest. Yet, he also craved the intellectual rigor, The camaraderie, the sense of impacting this mad, audacious undertaking, however minutely. Raj was already at his station, an archaeological site of scattered papers and depleted energy drink containers. He glanced up as Arthur neared, his brow knotted in thought. Morning, Arthur. I believe I've stumbled upon a plausible solution for that thermal diffusion issue we discussed yesterday. That IT hinges on modifying the radiant fin geometry. Arthur raised a hand. Raj, could we have a word? Raj looked concerned. Sure, what's going on? Arthur outlined Thorne's proposal, the enticement of security, the promise of a fulfilling future. That he scrutinized Raj's expression as he spoke, searching for any telltale sign. Raj listened intently, his face inscrutable. When Arthur finished, he leaned back and regarded the ceiling for a moment. So, you're thinking of departing? He asked, his voice subdued. Arthur sighed. I'm uncertain, Raj, that he's offering everything I believed I desired, stability, respect, an opportunity to revise my narrative. And what about this narrative? Raj gestured around the chaotic workspace. The one we're crafting here. Don't you think that's worth something? Arthur met Raj's gaze, observing the younger man's infectious zeal, his unwavering faith in the mission. He recalled their countless hours spent together, debating, challenging, gleaning wisdom from one another. He pictured the spark of comprehension in Raj's eyes when he at last grasped the significance of Arthur's seasoned intuition. It is, Arthur conceded, but Thorne is correct. This enterprise is a gamble. Musk is volatile. He's also a visionary, Raj countered, and he's willing to embrace calculated risks. That's why we're here. Arthur, achieve the impossible, something others deem unachievable. Raj leaned forward, his eyes locked on Arthur's. You've said it yourself, Arthur. Simulations hold value, but they can't supplant lived experience. They can't replicate intuition. That we require you here. I require you here. Arthur felt a surge of warmth, a sense of purpose dormant for too long. He looked at Raj, at the younger man's earnest features, and certainty crystallized within him. You're right, Raj, Arthur affirmed, a smile breaking across his face. This is where I belong. Simulations are useful, but they can't replace genuine experience. Raj grinned. So you're staying? Arthur nodded. I'm staying, but I might need your help figuring out how to craft a polite rejection email to a CEO who probably thinks I'm a fossil. Raj laughed. I'm confident we could devise something. But first, let's revisit that thermal dissipation issue. I sense we're on the cusp of a breakthrough. As they refocused on the schematics, Arthur felt an emotional lightness he hadn't known in years. The offer from Ares Dynamics still flickered at the edge of his consciousness, a tempting mirage of security and validation. But it remained just that, a mirage. The genuine reward wasn't a guaranteed future, but the chance to contribute, to guide, to be integral to something bigger than his individual struggles. He still had demons to exorcise, failures to transcend, but he would confront them here. With Raj at his side, pushing the boundaries of the conceivable, one meticulous calculation at a time. The card from Thorne nestled in his pocket, a reminder of the road untaken, a symbol of the redemption he was discovering, not in a comfortable retreat, but within the very eye of the storm. A plea for the future. Crimson Martian dust swirled on the colossal display, dominating the Boca Chica control room. Elon Musk stalked back and forth, his forehead a landscape of deep furrows. Another simulation hiccup, another blasted delay. What fresh hell? He jabbed at the screen. Penhaligon, has anyone seen Penhaligon? A young engineer, his complexion ashen beneath the relentless glare of the overhead lights, stammered. He's in a meeting, Musk, in engineering review for the landing gear's structural integrity. Review. We're trying to colonize Mars. People. Essential. Yes, but fetch him immediately. Musk pivoted, his gaze a roving spotlight across the room. Is this Ares Dynamics treachery still plaguing us? Is that the source of this lethargy? Arthur materialized, slightly out of breath, his tweed jacket rumpled. He'd been refining Raj's strut blueprints, offering improvements forged from decades of practical experience. The youngster possessed brilliance, yet youthful zeal sometimes overshadowed pragmatic considerations. Arthur, Musk snapped, piercing the organized pandemonium of mission control. Ares dynamics. Thorn, explain the situation. Arthur exhaled heavily, massaging the bridge of his nose. He'd hoped to dodge this confrontation. He extended and offered a strikingly advantageous one. Musk ceased his pacing, pinning Arthur with an unwavering look. Advantageous, more so than contributing to humankind's most monumental endeavor. Arthur returned the stare, resolute. It's more nuanced than mere compensation. Elon.it concerns. He faltered, the words catching in his throat. Concerns what, Arthur? Security? Validation. A ceremonial timepiece and a pat on the back for a job eventually got completed. Musk's tone dripped with thinly veiled scorn. Arthur winced. The jibe struck a nerve. It's about tranquility, knowing I won't bear culpability for another. His voice trailed off, the sentence incomplete. Musk's features softened imperceptibly, a fleeting flicker of empathy crossing his face. Another what, Arthur? Another Challenger catastrophe, another Columbia disaster. The words were spoken softly, yet their resonance filled the air. Silence descended, broken only by the hum of the servers and the hushed murmurs of the engineers. Arthur felt the weight of his past, a crushing burden threatening to suffocate him. He spoke at last, his voice a mere breath. I was a lead engineer on the Columbia mission. I reviewed the initial damage assessments. I advocated for a more comprehensive investigation, but I was overruled. Budget limitations, schedule pressures, the tiresome litany. He squeezed his eyes shut, the horrific imagery flashing before him. The fragmented shuttle during atmospheric reentry, the faces of the astronauts, forever captured in time. I carry that burden, Elon, every single day. Those faces, the haunting what-ifs. Musk stepped closer, his voice sincere and urgent. Arthur, listen. Mistakes occur. Tragedies unfold. But we mustn't allow them to cripple you. Define us. We must glean lessons and press onward. He placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder, a surprisingly tender gesture. You were involved with Columbia. That's a chapter in your story. It needn't be the entire narrative. You have an opportunity here. Arthur got a chance to employ your expertise, your insights, to help ensure we succeed. Help forge a future where humanity transcends this fragile planet. Musk indicated the massive display, where a simulated Martian vista stretched into the distance, promising a new epic. This transcends struts, rockets, even financial gain. This is about something far grander than any of us. This is about securing the future of our species. This is about pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and exploration. This is about inspiring future generations. He paused, his gaze locking onto Arthur's. And you, Arthur Penhaligon, possess a pivotal role. Raj requires your mentorship. The entire team craves your experience. I need your judgment. Don't permit the phantoms of the past to steal your chance to shape the future. Arthur fixed his gaze on the screen, the beckoning red planet. He recalled Raj, his eager face radiant with passion, his mind overflowing with ideas. He considered the other young engineers, their faces set with determination, their eyes transfixed on the objective. He contemplated the countless hours he devoted to scrutinizing schematics, running simulations, detecting potential weaknesses. That he recalled the deep satisfaction he derived from resolving a complex problem, knowing he'd made a genuine contribution. He considered the alternative, a cushy, well-remunerated existence at Ares Dynamics, a life of predictability and security, a life devoid of risk, but also devoid of purpose. He envisioned Thorne's self-satisfied grin, the unspoken promise of a generous severance package, and the hollow resonance of empty accolades. The weight on his shoulders dissipated, replaced by a sense of mission, a sense of solidarity, a sense of aspiration. He met Musk's gaze, his eyes clear, his voice firm. You're right, Elon. The past remains unchangeable, but we can learn from it. and we can apply that knowledge to build a superior future. He straightened his jacket, a new resolve etching itself onto his features. Tell me about this anomaly. Let's rectify it. Musk grinned, the strain visibly easing. Precisely what I wish to hear. The anomaly resides within the descent algorithm. During the final approach, the simulation suggests, well, the landing more closely resembles a controlled demolition than a graceful arrival. Arthur nodded, already engaging with the problem. Present the data. Let's commence. As they huddled over the console, dissecting the intricate code, Arthur felt a surge of renewed vigor. The ghosts of the past lingered, but they no longer imprisoned him. He was no longer defined solely by past failures, but by his potential. He was Arthur Penhaligon, engineer, and he was bound for Mars, in spirit, at least, and with luck, in reality. Raj approached hesitantly. Mr. Penhaligon, I overheard you discussing Ares dynamics with Mr. Musk. Arthur looked up, a nascent smile playing on his lips. Indeed, Raj, but I'm committed. We have a planet to transform, remember? Raj's face brightened. That's incredible, Mr. Penhaligon. I was concerned. I've already gained so much wisdom from you. A faint blush tinged his cheeks, and I'm eager to see my struts planted firmly on Martian soil. Arthur chuckled warmly. Then we'll ensure they're robust enough to withstand the challenge. He clapped Raj on the shoulder. Now let's revisit those designs. I believe I have an idea. Returning to the task, Arthur felt a profound sense of fulfillment that he had made the correct decision. He was where he belonged, surrounded by brilliant minds and audacious aspirations. He was a component of something larger than himself, something that would influence the destiny of humanity. The shimmering red surface of Mars on the screen, once a source of anxiety, now served as a beacon of optimism. He had a monumental task before him, and for the first time in what felt like an eon, he felt genuinely excited to undertake it. The future awaited, and Arthur Penhaligon was prepared to answer its call. The smear campaign. The initial article detonated like a bomb. Arthur's younger visage, undeniably his, glared from the screen, superimposed against the backdrop of the Columbia's fiery demise. The headline blared. Did SpaceX's Martian ambition rise from the ashes of disaster? Arthur caught sight of it first, Bryn Riley a worried shadow at his shoulder in the SpaceX cafeteria. Halfway through a bland protein bar, its metallic aftertaste intensified tenfold. His stomach clenched. What exactly are they saying, Bryn? He rasped, his voice tight. Bryn, typically a dynamo of focused energy, hesitated, her usual precision wavering. It's a look back. Arthur, take your time with the Columbia inquiry. A look back. A sugar-coated assault. More like, he grabbed her tablet, his thumb flying across the screen. It wasn't simply a retrospective. It was an exercise in character demolition. The piece exhumed every agonizing detail of the Columbia tragedy, with his role as lead engineer highlighted in bold strokes, subtly painting him as accountable. It zeroed in on the pressures he'd faced, the endless shifts, the ignored alarms. It even resurrected ancient, baseless allegations about his psychological state in the aftermath. Sources close to the investigation. My foot. Arthur grumbled, his grip tightening until his knuckles shone white against the tablet's frame, that he knew precisely who was orchestrating this symphony of malice. Marcus Thorne, of Ares Dynamics, the man who'd exuded false empathy and concealed threats in equal measure. A cascade of articles followed. A meticulously planned offensive. Point one pondered the ethical quandaries of entrusting someone with such a marred history to a venture of this magnitude. Another cast doubt on his fitness for the pressured atmosphere of SpaceX, hinting he might be a weak link. The true genius of the attack lay in its plausible deniability. Nothing explicit, but the insinuation resonated. Arthur Penhaligon was a broken, unreliable relic, a danger to any spacecraft. Meanwhile, Bryn transformed into a one-woman army. Her crisis management team coalesced, transforming her usually sunny office into a high-stakes command center. Whiteboards became canvases of bullet points, timelines, and potential rebuttals. She ignited a media campaign, scheduling interviews with SpaceX colleagues who championed Arthur's expertise and commitment. She championed a narrative of recovery, of a person who had stared into the abyss and emerged more resilient, more perceptive. "We have to seize control of this story," she declared, her tone steely. "They seek to cast Arthur as the villain, that we must illuminate the hero within." Elon, predictably, remained unfazed. He tweeted a photo of Arthur, his face a mask of concentration as he studied an intricate diagram. The caption, "Arthur Pede is a goddamn genius. Haters gonna hate. Hashtag Mars or bust." It was raw, impactful, and ignited a wildfire online. Brin, however, understood that tweets and favorable press releases were not enough. They needed to unearth the source, the hidden hand manipulating the narrative. That's where Eleanor Vance entered the fray. Eleanor, defined by her ingrained skepticism and unshakable resolve, was a force field of her own. She traversed the SpaceX campus like a wraith, her discerning eyes missing nothing. During her interview with Arthur, her questions were direct, uncompromising. "They're insinuating you were at fault, Arthur. Were you?" Arthur met her sharp gaze, his own unwavering. "I approved decisions that I was part of a team, but I wasn't the sole reason that no single person was to blame." Eleanor delved deeper, probing into the minutiae of the Columbia investigation, hunting for discrepancies, for any suggestion of suppressed information. Arthur responded patiently, reliving that nightmare once more, its oppressive weight settling on him. Following their discussion, Eleanor vanished into the sprawling depths of SpaceX headquarters, her investigation leading her down unexpected paths. She examined internal messages, scrutinized financial records, and questioned every individual who might have interacted with Ares Dynamics. Her initial breakthrough came in the form of a disgruntled ex-SpaceX employee, a mid-level engineer named David Kessler. Overlooked for a promotion, Kessler harbored profound resentment towards the company that he'd been contacted by an Ares Dynamics representative who offered him a lucrative consulting position in exchange for insights into SpaceX's engineering methods. Eleanor tracked Kessler down to a rundown motel room on Hawthorne's periphery. He was agitated, jittery, his regret evident. After skillful questioning and a discreetly veiled threat concerning corporate espionage and the appropriate authorities, he buckled. Kessler confessed to supplying Ares Dynamics with internal documents and contact information for SpaceX employees. He claimed ignorance as to their intentions, though he suspected it involved discrediting Arthur. The subsequent clue came from a surprising source, a junior reporter at a tech blog who had been approached by an anonymous source with a trove of documents concerning Arthur's past. Intrigued yet cautious, the reporter contacted Eleanor, sensing something amiss. The documents were heavily censored, but Eleanor pinpointed the distinctive Ares Dynamics watermark on one. The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling. Eleanor presented her findings to Brin and Elon. The smear campaign was undeniably masterminded by Ares Dynamics, with the purpose of undermining SpaceX and enticing Arthur away from the Mars mission. "So what's our move?" Brin questioned, her voice thick with fury. Elon grinned, a predatory glint in his gaze. "We retaliate, and we play dirty." The counterstrike was swift and devastating. SpaceX's legal eagles launched a lawsuit against Ares Dynamics, alleging libel, corporate spying, and unfair competition. Brin launched a PR counteroffensive, spotlighting Ares Dynamics' own past failures and ethically ambiguous behaviors. Concurrently, Eleanor burrowed into Ares Dynamics' inner workings, exposing a history of forceful tactics and shady business practices. She leaked her discoveries to the press, shifting the spotlight onto Marcus Thorne and his operation. The winds shifted. The pieces assailing Arthur dwindled to a mere trickle, replaced by accounts of Ares Dynamics' dubious activities. The smear campaign had crumbled, transforming into a full-blown public relations catastrophe for Thorne. Arthur watched the drama unfold, a sense of weary fulfillment washing over him. He had braved the storm, his name bruised but unbroken, that he accepted that he would never fully escape the shadow of Columbia. but he had demonstrated that he was more than simply a mistake. He was an engineer, a problem solver, a survivor, and he had a purpose to fulfill. One evening, Eleanor discovered Arthur in his office, engrossed in diagrams that he glanced up, a subtle smile gracing his lips. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, his voice genuine, "for trusting me." Eleanor shrugged, her characteristic skepticism flickering back. "I don't trust anyone, Arthur, that I just trust in the truth. And the truth is, you're incredibly talented at what you do." She paused, a spark resembling respect in her eyes. "Now, get back to work. We have a planet to conquer." Standing his ground. Though the tempest's fury had waned, an undercurrent of unease still vibrated through Arthur, settling deep in his marrow as he sat in his modest SpaceX office. The Ares Dynamics proposal lay before him. An exorbitant sum, a VP title, a hollow echo of innovation. Enticing, yet a deceptive melody promising solace from the specter of Columbia, a chance to vanish into corporate oblivion. His phone vibrated. Bren's message was terse. "Elon wants to see you now." Musk, a kinetic whirlwind, patrolled his glass-encased office. Through the soaring windows, the launch pad beckoned. A silent promise etched against the horizon. He halted, his gaze laser-focused on Arthur. "They came after you, Arthur, because they recognize your worth. That makes you family." He jabbed a button on the intercom. "Prepare a statement, stat." Musk unleashed his initial salvo via Twitter. A blistering, impassioned defense of Arthur, branding Ares' gambit as contemptible, deceptive, and a pathetic attempt to derail progress. He amplified Arthur's SpaceX contributions, his unparalleled grasp of orbital mechanics, and his dedication to the Mars endeavor. The tweets detonated across the internet. #ArthurStays trended at a decent start, but far from decisive. "This requires a frontal assault," Musk declared, pivoting from the window. "Press conference. You, me, Bren will dismantle their fabrication." Arthur flinched. "A press conference? Elon, public speaking isn't my forte." The mere prospect of facing a throng of reporters, cameras ravenous for a story, questions poised like stilettos, triggered a wave of nausea. "Then you adapt," Musk stated firmly. "The world deserves to hear your perspective. Your truth." He clapped Arthur on the shoulder, the gesture surprisingly grounding. "Bren will coach you. She's a damn miracle worker." Bren, ever composed amidst the turmoil, steered Arthur to a conference room, equipped with a laptop and a steaming mug of Earl Grey. "All right, Arthur, let's strategize," she began, her voice a harbor in the storm. "We won't let them dictate the narrative, we'll reclaim it." The ensuing hours were spent meticulously dissecting the Ares assault, foreseeing potential inquiries, constructing counterarguments. Bren pulled no punches. She acknowledged the pain, the resentment, the vulnerability, but she also highlighted the tenacity, the knowledge, the unwavering commitment that had brought Arthur to SpaceX. "They want to portray you as a liability," Bren said, her eyes holding Arthur's. "We're going to demonstrate you're an invaluable asset, a goddamn irreplaceable resource." The most grueling task was confronting Columbia. The memory was a fresh incision, a persistent throb. He had endlessly relived the tragedy, searching for a missed clue, a way to alter the past. "You have to address it," Brent advised gently. "But don't let it define you that you've learned. You bear the weight, but it isn't the whole story." Arthur wrestled with his statement, chasing the precise words that he yearned to convey: his regret, his accountability, his pledge to ensure such a catastrophe never recurred. He wanted to present the man he had become, not the man he once was. The press conference was a cacophony of blinding flashes and clamoring voices. Musk stood sentinel at his side, a bulwark against the onslaught. Bren lingered on the periphery, a reassuring presence. Musk commenced, his voice resonating with unwavering conviction. He excoriated Ares Dynamics' tactics, denouncing them as unscrupulous and shameful. He lauded Arthur's expertise, his dedication, his crucial contributions to the Mars initiative. Then it was Arthur's turn. He approached the podium, his heart a frantic drum, He scanned the sea of faces, each one a potential judge, a potential executioner. He inhaled deeply and he spoke of Colombia, of the errors committed, of the lessons gleaned, that he spoke of the enduring sorrow, the burden of responsibility. I will never forget Colombia, he stated, his voice thick with emotion. It is woven into my being, but does not confine me. For 2 decades, I have striven to honor the fallen by dedicating myself to safer, more reliable space exploration. He paused, meeting the reporter's gazes. I believe in the Mars mission. I believe in the boundless potential of human innovation. And I believe that together, we can achieve the impossible. He spoke of SpaceX, of the team's fervor and dedication, of the innovative spirit that permeated the very air. He spoke of his enthusiasm to contribute, of his resolve to see it succeed. He fielded questions with composure and candor. Refusing to be provoked, he addressed the concerns regarding his age, his experience, his history. He acknowledged the perils, but emphasized the extraordinary possibilities that, as he continued, he perceived a shift in the atmosphere. The hostility began to recede, yielding to curiosity, understanding, perhaps even a glimmer of hope. The digital tide turned. #ArthurStays surged. People shared tales of second chances, of redemption, of the transformative power of forgiveness. Many recalled Arthur's earlier contributions to space safety, largely eclipsed by the shadow of the Columbia disaster. Talking heads began to dissect Ares Dynamics' motivations, their ethics, their very relevance in the face of SpaceX's audacious vision. Later that evening, Arthur remained. In his office, the echoes of the press conference still reverberating, that he felt drained, yet strangely invigorated. He had confronted his demons and emerged victorious. Bryn discovered him there, a weary smile gracing her face. "You are brilliant, Arthur," she said, extending a bottle of water. "Absolutely brilliant." "It wasn't solely me," Arthur countered, regarding her with gratitude. "It was IT was Elon, IT was everyone at SpaceX." He seized the Ares Dynamics offer, ripped it asunder, and consigned it to the wastebasket. He wasn't retreating, he was resolved, he was standing firm, he was contributing to something larger than himself, and he was finally ready to embrace the future, not be shackled by the past. Mars landing. The monitors cast a lurid, flickering glow across Arthur's weary face, a canvas etched with a blend of trepidation and fervent hope. 3 years, the significant portion of his life funneled into this singular juncture. Though it wasn't solely his sacrifice, hundreds, thousands, toiling in Hawthorne, Boca Chica, and elsewhere, united by a single, audacious ambition: humankind on Martian soil. The launch had been immaculate, a precisely orchestrated ballet of controlled detonations, a behemoth ascending on fiery columns. From the control room, Arthur's gut clenched tighter with each passing second. The horrific specter of Columbia's disintegration burned into his memory, a stark contrast to the victorious roar that reverberated through the very structure of the building. Yet, this ascent was flawless, pristine, a testament to expertly managed power. Red Dragon Asterisk, as they christened her, shed Earth's gravity and commenced its solitary odyssey. The ensuing months dissolved into a whirlwind of telemetry analysis, course adjustments, and relentless simulations. Arthur, in concert with Anya and Raj, meticulously scrutinized every data stream, his accumulated experience a steadying presence against their youthful exuberance and sophisticated algorithms that he'd push them relentlessly, insisting they anticipate every eventuality, every potential point of failure, keenly aware of how easily hope could shatter amidst the unforgiving void. Initially skeptical of his analog approach, Anya gradually grew to value his perspective. He detected a glimmer of understanding in her eyes, a begrudging acknowledgement that seasoned expertise, while no match for innovation, could be a formidable asset. Raj, the consummate student, absorbed Arthur's knowledge with alacrity, firing question after question, challenging assumptions, and ultimately championing the revised landing system Arthur had conceived. Now, The critical moment was at hand. Red Dragon plunged into the Martian atmosphere, a blazing projectile bisecting the alien sky. The control room buzzed with palpable tension. Every gaze locked onto the live feed, a grainy transmission from the starship's exterior cameras revealing the ochre landscape hurtling toward them. "Guidance is nominal," Anya reported, her voice strained with concentration. "Heat shield performing within design parameters." Arthur's breath hitched, his pulse thrumming in his ears. The heat shield was paramount, the initial bastion against the scorching friction of atmospheric entry. He recalled the agonizing inquest following Columbia, the laborious examination of each tile, every fraction of reinforced carbon-carbon. Years he'd spent haunted by that tragedy, and now he prayed that the lessons gleaned, the flaws rectified, would prevail. "Deploying aero brakes," Raj announced, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. "Altitude, 15 kilometers. Velocity, Mach 3. The image on the screen wavered as the starship's articulated surfaces extended, slowing its descent. Arthur leaned forward, his grip on the console tightening until his knuckles shone white. This marked the pivotal phase, the transition from supersonic speeds to a controlled landing, that a complex interplay between gravitational forces, aerodynamics, and engine thrust. Then materialized the moment Arthur had both anticipated and dreaded. The ignition sequence .6 Raptor engines roared to full capacity, their brilliant blue exhaust carving through the Martian atmosphere. The starship reoriented vertically, preparing for touchdown. "Initiating powered descent," Anya confirmed. "Altitude, 10 kilometers. Velocity, 800 meters per second." Silence enveloped the control room, broken only by the hum of the computers and the faint static emanating from the communication link. Every face reflected profound focus, every breath arrested by the unfolding drama. Arthur scanned the telemetry data, searching for deviations, harbingers of trouble. He had refined the landing system, finessing algorithms, incorporating fallbacks, integrating knowledge gleaned from countless simulations. But simulations were just theoretical models. Reality invariably proved more intricate, more unpredictable. Altitude, 5 kilometers. Velocity, 400 meters per second. Raj murmured, his voice barely audible. Guidance holding steady. Elon Musk, who had been pacing like a restless predator, halted and stood beside Arthur, but he remained silent. But Arthur sensed his intense drive, his unwavering faith in the mission, his steadfast confidence in his team. Arthur returned his gaze, a wordless acknowledgement passing between them. Each bore the burden of immense responsibility, driven by an insatiable need to expand the frontiers of human capability. Altitude, 1 kilometer. Velocity, 100 meters per second. Anya announced, a note of exhilaration creeping into her tone. Landing legs deploying. The image on the screen shifted as the starship's landing gear unfolded, their metallic supports gleaming under the Martian sun. The ground loomed larger, a stark panorama of crimson dust and craggy formations. 500 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters. Velocity, check, nominal, Raj recited, his voice climbing in register. Arthur closed his eyes, his mind racing, reliving every calculation, every simulation, every discussion. He had exhausted every possibility. Now, the outcome rested with the machine, the algorithms, the dedicated individuals who had engineered this marvelous vehicle. "Touchdown confirmed," Anya exclaimed, her voice ringing with joy. "We have touchdown." A triumphant eruption swept through the control room. People leaped up, cheering, embracing, exchanging high fives. The months-long tension detonated, unleashing a surge of jubilation and relief. Arthur was overwhelmed by emotion, a confluence of pride, gratitude, and disbelief. He had succeeded. They had succeeded. They had landed on Mars. He opened his eyes to find Elon Musk standing before him, beaming. "You did it, Arthur," he said, clapping him forcefully on the shoulder. "You bloody well did it." Arthur mustered a feeble smile, his throat constricted. He glanced at Anya and Raj, their faces radiant with excitement, their eyes gleaming with accomplishment. He recognized in them the future of space exploration. The coming wave of engineers and scientists poised to propel humankind to the stars. He had contributed to that future. He had atoned for his past. He had rediscovered his purpose on the screen. The image of Red Dragon, standing tall on the Martian surface, dominated the frame that a minor step for a starship, a monumental leap for humanity. And for Arthur Penhaligon, a final, resolute stride away from the shadows of yesterday and into the radiant dawn of new beginnings, redemption. The Martian dust settled, mirroring a calmness that descended on Arthur. Hours earlier, Elon Musk had been a dynamo, a force of nature. Now, standing beside Arthur, bathed in the ruby afterglow of the setting sun, he seemed almost humbled. The Red Dragon lander, battle-scarred yet victorious, stood a short distance away, a monument to human innovation, and, Arthur mused, a testament to good, old-fashioned grit. "We landed it, Arthur," Musk murmured, his usual bravado tempered at a clap on the shoulder followed, both heartfelt and a touch clumsy. "You were right. Simulations are invaluable, but they can't substitute real-world experience. Instinct. Thank you." Arthur simply nodded, the burden of past failures easing. He'd contributed, he'd made a real difference. The ghosts of Columbia, for the first time in years, felt less oppressive. Back on Earth, SpaceX had undergone a subtle metamorphosis. Arthur, once considered an anachronism, a figure from a bygone era, was now revered. The man who salvaged the Mars landing. Junior engineers, who had initially dismissed him as outdated, now sought his counsel, hungry for the wisdom forged in decades of aerospace experience. Rajesh Raj Patel, a brilliant mind prone to over-reliance on digital models, became a fixture in Arthur's cramped, book-laden office. Raj, whose initial skepticism had been palpable, now championed Arthur's expertise. He'd often perch on the edge of the desk, bombarding Arthur with questions about thermal protection systems and landing gear intricacies. "Mr. Penhaligon," Raj began one afternoon, toying with a miniature starship replica, "I've been examining the Red Dragon landing telemetry. The data presents some anomalies compared to our retro-propulsion simulations. There's a divergence." Arthur leaned back, a playful glint in his eye. "A divergence, you say? Elaborate." Raj launched into a torrent of technical specifics, a whirlwind of equations and jargon. Arthur listened patiently, occasionally interjecting with a question or a gentle suggestion, but he avoided interrupting, refrained from belittling, allowing Raj to wrestle with the problem, guiding him with subtle nudges. "Have you factored in the influence of Martian aerosols on the engine nozzles?" Arthur inquired, his tone even. The simulations might not fully capture the density gradient and granular makeup of the dust at that altitude. Raj's eyes widened. "That's not plausible that we operated under the assumption of uniform distribution, but the actual conditions might be far more heterogeneous." "Precisely," Arthur responded, a flash of satisfaction in his voice. "Sometimes reality throws punches simulations can't foresee. That's where experience steps in. That's when you need to draw on intuition, a feeling in your bones." Raj dedicated the following days to refining the simulations, integrating Arthur's insights about the Martian dust. The results were telling. The revised models mirrored the telemetry with remarkable fidelity. "You nailed it, Mr. Penhaligon," Raj exclaimed, bursting into Arthur's office, his face bright with excitement. "The dust was the linchpin. Thank you. I would have overlooked that completely." Arthur smiled warmly. "Don't credit me, Raj. You did the heavy lifting. You just needed a little course correction. Remember, simulations are powerful tools, exceptional tools, but they're no replacement for critical thinking, for questioning assumptions, for grasping the fundamental physics." He recognized a younger version of himself in Raj. The ambition, the intellectual prowess, the occasional arrogance that comes with youthful genius. He sensed that Raj had the potential for greatness, perhaps even surpassing his own achievements. What Raj needed was direction, mentorship, and a steadying hand to guide him through the complex tapestry of space exploration. Arthur began dedicating increasing amounts of time to mentoring the young engineers at SpaceX. He initiated workshops, spearheaded brainstorming sessions, and disseminated his knowledge freely. He recounted tales from his tenure at NASA, stories of both spectacular victories and devastating failures, sharing lessons etched in the crucible of experience. That he never sanitized the truth, that he spoke candidly about the Columbia tragedy, discussing the miscalculations, the oversights, the lives extinguished. He intended for them to comprehend the profound implications of their work, the immense responsibility weighing on their shoulders. Space exploration is no game, he'd emphasize. It's a perilous, relentless endeavor. Yet it's also the most paramount thing we can do. It's about transcending the limits of human understanding, about expanding our horizons, about safeguarding the future of our species. His words struck a chord with the young engineers. They saw in Arthur not just a veteran engineer, but a mentor, a guide, a living embodiment of the pioneering spirit. Weeks blurred into months. Arthur discovered a level of fulfillment at SpaceX that had eluded him during his time at NASA, that he felt appreciated, respected, and valued, that he was making a real impact, not just by lending his expertise, but by shaping the next generation of spacefaring pioneers. Then came the proposition from Ares Dynamics, a rival of SpaceX, featuring an enticing salary, a corner office, and the command of his own team. The offer was seductive, especially given his precarious financial standing. He could finally secure his future, provide for his dependents, and bury his past definitively. He informed Musk about the offer, half expecting a counterproposal, a heartfelt plea to remain. However, Musk simply nodded, his expression inscrutable. "It's your decision, Arthur," he said. "Pursue what you deem best for yourself." Arthur spent a restless night grappling with the choice, that he meticulously weighed the advantages and disadvantages, the potential risks and rewards. He considered the financial benefits, the prestige, the security. Yet he also contemplated the junior engineers at SpaceX, Raj, the Mars mission, and the trajectory of space exploration. He concluded that he had unearthed something at SpaceX that had eluded him elsewhere. A sense of conviction, a sense of belonging, a sense of absolution. He had the chance to contribute to something truly monumental, to leave behind a legacy that would endure. He had the chance to atone for the errors of the past. The following morning, he entered Musk's office and conveyed his decision. "I'm staying," he declared. "I want to see this through. I want to nurture these young engineers and help them forge a brighter future." Musk grinned, a genuine smile that illuminated his face. "I knew you would," he responded. "You're one of us now, Arthur, that you're part of the SpaceX family." Arthur experienced a surge of emotion, a wave of gratitude and connection. He had found his niche, he had found his purpose, he had found his redemption. Weeks later, Arthur received an invitation to witness the launch of a resupply mission destined for the Red Dragon lander on Mars. He stood on the launch pad, surrounded by the young engineers he had mentored, the thunderous roar of the Falcon Heavy vibrating through the ground beneath his feet. As the rocket ascended into the heavens, a blazing pillar cutting through the twilight sky, Arthur felt a profound sense of awe and wonder. He gazed upward, envisioning the Red Dragon lander perched on the Martian surface, a diminutive beacon of human presence on another world. He retrieved his phone, opened the Uber app, and paused. He hesitated. Then, with a resolute swipe, deleted it. That he no longer required it. He was no longer chauffeuring people to their destinations. He was helping them reach the stars. His journey had come full circle. The Uber app would remain unused. Arthur, the retired NASA engineer, had ultimately discovered his true destination. His redemption was complete.